History. Monday, Globe Trekker at 8:30 on Pearl.
Debate over political reform olive branch. Greece and Eurozone at loggerheads over country's fiscal policy. And Serena Williams a champion again down under. Good evening. Civic Party lawmaker Ronnie Tong has floated the idea of scrapping functional constituencies in Lezhgo in 2020 in exchange for Pan-Democrat support for the government's upcoming political reform package. Some say the proposal is worth considering, while others are more skeptical. Liz Yun has our top story.
Civic Party legislator Ronnie Tong proposed earlier that if the Hong Kong and central governments agree to scrap all functional constituencies in the 2020 Legislative Council election, he would lobby pan-democratic lawmakers to support the reform proposal for the 2017 chief executive election. The proposal for 2017 needs the support of 2/3 of lawmakers. So, even if all 43 pro-establishment legislators vote in favor, 4 more votes are still needed. Two Pan-Democrats, Joseph Lee and Charles Mok, said Tong's proposal is worth considering.
If that is put into the deal in a very clearly worded way, maybe not just, it would definitely not be just a promise from the Hong Kong government. It must be coming from the NPCSC. If that happens, then I think I must give it full consideration.
But Occupy Central organizer Chen Kim-man believes it's almost impossible for Pan-Democrats to accept such a proposal.
Why should Hong Kong people accept something which is fake and then give excuse to the government not to give Hong Kong people a genuine choice?
The LegCo president has his own doubts.
Is it necessary that when we elect all the seats by universal suffrage, the functional constituency seats must all be abolished?
Zhang said some lawmakers are against abolishing the functional constituency seats. So, if the government agrees to Tong's proposal, it risks losing support for its 2017 reform plan. A local National People's Congress deputy waded in, telling the Pan-Democrats to be realistic.
It is unrealistic to ask the central government to make accurate or concrete promise for the future development.
Liz Yun, TVB News.
Next, controversy over another article in a student publication on Hong Kong independence. Education Chief Eddie Ng says society should look at the issue in an objective way. The Hong Kong University Students' Union publication Undergrad has released another controversial article. It points out that Beijing has already ruled out universal suffrage for Hong Kong, and that one country, two systems is dying. The people of Hong Kong are facing destruction, so they have to fight the war and begin a revolution or become slaves. The publication insists it's engaged in a debate on whether Hong Kong should be independent, not advocating it. Commenting on the article today, the Secretary for Education said freedom of expression is one of the territory's core values. But Eddie Ng also referred to Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying's recent criticism of an earlier article in Undergrad on Hong Kong independence. Leung said in his policy address that the piece put forward fallacies and that the SAR must stay alert. The education chief said the CE was simply sincerely telling people to remain alert amid all these suggestions. Ng added people should look at this from an objective point of view. Now to the flu outbreak. The government warns the H3N2 vaccine won't be available for a few more months. Rani Samtani has more.
The deadly influenza outbreak has already claimed more than 80 lives this year. Secretary for Food and Health Ko Wing-man said the number of flu cases has soared in the past 10 days. And because the existing vaccine has failed to help protect against the mutated variant of the H3N2 virus, known as the Switzerland strain, the government is trying to get hold of the correct jab.
This is only the first month of the traditional seasonal flu. If we already have so many serious cases, then I think it is reasonable only to expect that there will be more to come. We try to explore the possibility of introducing a vaccine which is targeting the circulating strain of H3N2 influenza, but I was given to understand that this is only going to be available in a sufficient number, at least in March or April.
Since the start of the year, Prince of Wales Hospital has received nearly 300 H3N2 flu patients, exceeding the average number of cases during the seasonal flu period. Many of them involved elderly patients, and 15 of them have been treated at the intensive care unit. Professor David Hui from the Chinese University's School of Medicine said if people suffer from a fever or cough within 48 hours of catching the flu, they should be prescribed the drug Tamiflu. And he said it is best to treat patients within 5 days of flu symptoms appearing. Ronnie Samtani, TVB News.
U.S. President Barack Obama and the Dalai Lama will attend an event in Washington next week. The White House says there are no plans for them to have a meeting. The Tibetan spiritual leader and the U.S. president will be at the National Prayer Breakfast on Thursday. Their last meeting in February 2014 was criticized by Beijing, which warned that it would damage Sino-American ties. Now commenting on next week's gathering, a spokesman for the Chinese embassy in Washington said Tibet-related issues are China's domestic affairs. The spokesman said Beijing is against leaders of any countries meeting the Dalai Lama in any form. Thousands of Shiites gathered across Pakistan today to protest against the bombing of a Shiite mosque yesterday that killed at least 59 people. At the site of the blast, mourners held a mass funeral for those who died. Other protesters burned tires and chanted slogans, demanding the arrest of those responsible and better protection for Shiite places of worship. The bombing occurred when hundreds of worshippers were packed in the mosque for prayers. The Sunni militant group Jundallah, a splinter group of Pakistan's Taliban, has claimed responsibility. Greece and its European creditors were in dispute as they opened talks on the country's bailout package yesterday. Alan Buknia has that story.
Greece's finance minister met with the Eurozone's finance chief in Athens yesterday. The 5-day-old radical left government insists on keeping its pre-election promises to seek a substantial cut on the rescue loans and scrap painful budget measures that were demanded in exchange for the loans.
Η κυβέρνησή μας θα πορευτεί με γνώμονα.
Greece's finance minister said they were causing self-fed deflation and non-viable debt. The creditors were having none of it and warned Greece of the consequences.
It is of the utmost importance that Greece remains on a path of recovery. This requires commitment to the reform process and to fiscal sustainability. Taking unilateral steps or ignoring previous arrangements is not the way forward. Problems in the Greek economy have not disappeared or changed overnight with the elections. There are still major challenges ahead in order to realize sustainable growth.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel met with French President François Hollande in Strasbourg to try to find a common position on Greece. French officials have said that Greece could be given more time to pay off its debt, but dismissed the notion of a write-off or a deviation from its promised reforms. German officials have been much more hard-line. The country's finance ministry said it would not give in to what it called blackmail and described a debt cut as divorced from reality. Shares on the Athens Stock Exchange plunged 13% this week as investors worry that Greece will go into default unless a deal with the creditors is reached soon. The country's next debt obligations are due in March. Alan Brookney at TVB News.
Tens of thousands of people marched in Madrid today in support of Spain's fledgling radical leftist party, Podemos. Podemos, which means We Can, is an anti-austerity party that hopes to emulate the success by Greece's Syriza party in elections this year. It aims to shatter the country's predominantly two-party system. The party's meteoric rise is greatly due to the charisma of its leader, Pablo Iglesias, a ponytailed 36-year-old political science professor. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry will travel to Ukraine next week to show support for Ukrainian troops battling pro-Russian rebels. Full-blown fighting erupted again earlier this month following a poorly respected ceasefire. Artillery shells killed at least 15 people in the rebel stronghold of Donetsk yesterday. The separatists are inching towards a crucial rail line that connects Donetsk with Luhansk. The U.S. State Department said Kerry will meet with senior Ukrainian officials next Thursday. After that, he will meet his Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov, in Munich.
He was in Ukraine about a year ago.
Back locally now. ATV's executive director Ip Ka-po claims the broadcaster is trying to pay staff their December salaries by the end of next week. The Secretary for Labor and Welfare hopes the problem is rectified before the Lunar New Year. Rani Samtani has more.
Court proceedings over ATV's failure to pay staff their salaries on time began yesterday. And last night, the troubled broadcaster announced that it has paid the overdue December salaries to 80% of its employees whose monthly income is below $22,000. Executive Director Ip Ka-po said they will try to pay the remaining staff members by the end of next week. Ip added that ATV's court-appointed managers are reviewing the tender applications for a 10.75% stake in the broadcaster. He said the parties involved are analyzing ATV's current difficulties. As for the January salaries, Ip said they are working hard to raise the money.
It's my wish that because the Chinese Lunar New Year is very important to all the employees, I hope that we can pay as soon as possible. And we have different methods to get the money. And I hope that all these methods can be completed.
Secretary for Labor and Welfare Matthew Jung said the delay in paying wages is unacceptable. Jung said paying employees should be a priority. He stressed that the Labor Department is taking strict legal action over late pay, and he hopes the pay dispute could be resolved by the Lunar New Year. Rani Samtani, TVB News.
Applications began today for the central allocation for Primary 1 school places. This year, 3 new schools were added to the network designated for cross-border children. Owen Feng reports.
Parents arrived at the centre in Shengshui early this morning, hoping to secure a Primary 1 place for their children. This mother says she wants her child to attend a school in North District because it's more convenient. Some parents, however, said they don't mind which school their children go to as long as they can receive an education in Hong Kong. This is the second year the central allocation system designated for cross-border children has been in place. 3 schools from Tsing-yi have been added to the designated network, which spans 7 other districts. The 3 new schools will provide 175 places. Overall, there are about 2,600 spots reserved for cross-border children. That's a decrease of more than 500 places compared with last year. Chairman of the North District Primary School Headmasters Conference, Chan Siu-hong, says fewer people showed interest in these designated places during the first round of application. Some parents may have moved to Hong Kong and the children become local students, he explained. Secretary for Education Eddie Ng believes a school network designated for cross-border children is still useful. Ng said the government has a number of measures in place to ensure there are enough spots for these kids.
We might have a time-limited new school premises be converted, be deployed. We might expand, increase number of classes, and of particular for those schools which might have unused classrooms.
Results of the central allocation for Primary 1 school places will be announced on June 6th. Owen Fung, TVB News.
Sports and in tennis, Serena Williams continued her dominance of Maria Sharapova. The American beat the Russian in today's Australian Open women's final in Melbourne. The scores were 6-3 and 7-6. It was the 6th championship down under and 19th Grand Slam title.